Imagine this, a Hall of Fame legend who ruled the NFL and then took over the media world, all falling apart in just a few weeks. Was it just a scandal or a carefully planned takedown? Today, we're uncovering the truth that will shake you to your core. His lawyer put that information out for everyone to hear. To me, the fact that she refused the offer shows this is not about grabbing quick money. No, it feels like something bigger, a much heavier shakedown. I am telling you, this is why I can confidently say what I say. Can I get another one? Yes, sir, thank you. Let's go. But here's the real question shaking the sports world. How does a Hall of Fame legend fall from NFL greatness to being fired in disgrace by ESPN? That is what people have been debating in group chats, boardrooms, and all over social media since Shannon Sharpe's career flipped upside down. Less than 2 weeks after ending a $50 million civil case filled with serious accusations, the three-time Super Bowl champion was suddenly pushed out by the biggest sports media company in the world. Publicly, Shannon Sharpe kept his usual charm, masking tension behind laughter. On his Nightcap podcast, he playfully joked about having light pockets, teasing his co-host Ocho for a quick loan. The jokes landed, but those who followed the news knew exactly what was happening beneath the humor. The timing of his lighthearted banter could not have been worse. He never had to say the lawsuit's name. Its shadow was already looming over him. In fact, the silence around it only made the fall seem sharper, the embarrassment more intense. Behind the scenes, many people whispered that Sharpe and his team had mishandled the situation from the very start. To them, this was not simply a case of bad press. It was a public relations nightmare, a slow leak that turned into a flood. For years, his reputation had been bulletproof. Fans saw him as witty, bold, and fearless, someone who could hold his own in any debate. But now, the image was starting to crack. This was not your typical media scandal that comes and goes in a news cycle. This was the final crash after a high-speed spiral, one that started quietly and picked up momentum until it became impossible to ignore. What began as quiet chatter soon became the talk of sports radio, online forums, and social media feeds. Within days, the story was everywhere. The civil lawsuit, filed by a woman more than 30 years younger than Sharpe, carried heavy accusations, repeated misconduct, threats, and behavior that painted a picture completely at odds with the man his fans thought they knew. His legal team moved quickly, publicly calling it nothing more than a shakedown. They claimed her goal was simple: to force Sharpe into paying to keep damaging claims out of the headlines. But then came the revelation that shocked many, even those who believed in him. His own legal team admitted he had offered her at least $10 million to make the entire situation disappear. The intention, they argued, was not an admission of guilt, but a way to protect his name and career from the storm they saw coming. The problem was, the headlines came anyway. And once they did, the damage was irreversible. The media pounced on every detail. Some outlets framed it as a morality tale, a cautionary warning about how quickly a public figure can fall. Others questioned his judgment in offering money, saying it only added fuel to the accusations. Fans were divided. Some stood by him, convinced he was being targeted. Others admitted their trust had been shaken. The noise became too loud to ignore, and soon, ESPN, the network that had given him a powerful platform, made its move. It was not an explosive firing or a dramatic suspension. It was quieter, but the message was clear. Sharpe's position was no longer untouchable. The network's decision added yet another layer to the unfolding crisis. What made this moment so striking was how quickly the situation had escalated. Just months earlier, Sharpe was riding high, celebrated for his sharp takes, quick wit, and ability to blend sports analysis with entertainment. But the same public attention that had lifted him up was now magnifying every flaw, every rumor, every accusation. The lawsuit had not just challenged his legal standing, it had struck at the core of his public identity. In the world of sports media, credibility is currency. Once it is questioned, every word, every opinion, and every on-air moment is seen through a different lens. Sharpe knew this. That is why he tried to keep the tone light, to make it seem like he was unaffected. But the reality was that the story was following him everywhere. The internet, always hungry for drama, dissected his every appearance. Clips from Nightcap were shared with captions mocking his financial jokes. Every smile was analyzed, every pause in his speech replayed as if it revealed some hidden truth. Even those who did not follow sports began to recognize his name, but now it was linked to scandal rather than success. It is one thing to battle criticism from strangers online. It is another to see your professional home, your main platform, create distance from you. For Sharpe, this moment marked a turning point. He could no longer control the narrative in the same way he once had. In the end, the lesson was brutal and simple. In the public eye, perception moves faster than facts. Whether the lawsuit would hold up in court almost did not matter anymore. The court of public opinion had already begun its trial, and in that space, the verdict can arrive long before the evidence is fully heard. For now, Sharpe continues to speak, to entertain, and to try to project confidence. But the shadow of this lawsuit and the $10 million offer that could not keep it quiet remains. The jokes may still get laughs, but they also serve as a reminder of the cost of even a single misstep when the world is watching. Days later, when his brother Sterling Sharpe was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Shannon's scandal overshadowed the celebration. His firing became the main story. The stain would not wash away. But maybe this downfall should not have been a surprise. Warnings had been out there long before. Comedians Katt Williams and Monique, both known for mixing humor with hard truths, had spoken on patterns like this: powerful black men getting caught in dangerous relationships with much younger white women. Many fail to see the difference until it is too late. For Monique, this was not just theory. She had seen how quickly public perception can turn and how accusations, whether true or not, can destroy careers built over decades. Her warning was that when someone's life becomes public property, one wrong move, one bad choice in who they trust, can open the door to manipulation, betrayal, or worse. Shannon Sharpe's current crisis seems to echo those warnings almost perfectly. He is now facing a situation where his money, his image, and his reputation are all on the line. The scandal has pulled him into a spotlight he never wanted, one filled with suspicion, judgment, and endless commentary from strangers. And while his legal team calls the accusations a cash grab, the reality is that the damage to his name may be impossible to fully undo. In the court of public opinion, once a stain appears, it rarely washes out completely. Right now, Shannon is learning that lesson in real time. He was building an empire. His Club Shay Shay podcast was exploding, with the Katt Williams episode alone making more money than any NFL season he played. Reports say it brought in over $6 million. But today, that success is shadowed by scandal, and the empire he was building has been shaken to its core. Shannon Sharpe's success story had been one of rapid momentum, the kind that turned a retired NFL Hall of Famer into a cultural powerhouse almost overnight. On air, he wore his wins proudly, even flashing a $70,000 green-faced John Mayer Rolex as if to underline just how lucrative the Club Shay Shay machine had become. That smile, full of confidence and swagger, told one story. But behind it was a much darker reality. The very foundation of his media empire was beginning to shake. Industry insiders claim a staggering $100 million podcast deal was on the verge of closing, a move that would have cemented his position as one of the most influential independent voices in sports and culture. Yet, with the lawsuit now hanging over him, those negotiations have reportedly gone silent. Nobody knows if the deal will survive, or if it has already slipped away. But the whispers swirling around Sharpe's troubles do not stop at bad timing or poor judgment. There is a growing theory in certain circles that this was more than just a man stumbling under the weight of success. It was an orchestrated takedown. The Illuminati setup talk, familiar to anyone who follows entertainment conspiracies, has returned in full force. The narrative is that Sharpe rose too fast, too independently, and outside the usual control channels that shape celebrity careers. His partnership with Colin Cowherd's The Volume, his unapologetically bold interviews on Club Shay Shay, and his willingness to openly discuss uncomfortable truths about race, power, and corruption made him a figure both celebrated and difficult to manage. For his supporters, This looks like a familiar pattern, the same cycle that other outspoken figures claim to have faced. A personality becomes too influential, too connected to the public, and too unwilling to bow to certain unspoken rules. Then, suddenly, scandals and allegations appear, crippling their credibility and drying up their opportunities. Whether or not there is truth to these theories, one thing is certain: Shannon Sharpe's position is no longer untouchable. What was once a story about a retired athlete reinventing himself as a cultural icon has turned into a cautionary tale about the fragile nature of fame. In the court of public opinion, the verdict is still undecided, but the stakes have never been higher for Sharpe's future. It would not be the first time a star's career was dismantled the moment they started moving without permission. Kanye West once warned about handlers and staged collapses. And Katt Williams, in that now famous Club Shay Shay interview, long before federal agents raided Diddy's mansions, openly named names and hinted at a blueprint. He warned that chasing influence inside a white-dominated system could end with betrayal and scandal. At the time, it sounded provocative. Now, it feels prophetic. But Shannon did not listen. Maybe he thought his media smarts and discipline would protect him. After all, he had stayed clean through more than a decade on air, rebranding himself from a flashy NFL veteran into a respected voice. But when a $50 million lawsuit lands, with two accusers bringing decade-spanning allegations, control disappears fast. Once intimate audio surfaces, staged, consensual, or coerced, the optics take over. Past Instagram Live clips showing what seemed like a private moment re-emerged, paired with whispers of earlier settlements, including a buried case involving a female FS1 production assistant. The idea this was a single misstep began to crumble. On Easter Sunday, a lawsuit hit Nevada State Court, and with Shannon now a huge media name, it drew instant attention. For those who believe the conspiracy talk, this was not a man dropping the ball, it was the ball being ripped from his hands by people who never wanted him holding it. The theory follows a familiar Hollywood pattern: powerful men seduced, exposed, and thrown aside when they become too dangerous to the gatekeepers. Was Shannon reckless with his personal life? Absolutely. But was he also targeted? That is the question no one in mainstream sports media wants to touch. The timing, the silence from ESPN, and the careful release of damaging stories, it all looks like a planned story arc. If it is coincidence, it is an extraordinary one. If it is a setup, then Shannon Sharpe has just become another chapter in Hollywood's oldest story, one that ends with silence, settlement, and shame. It did not take ESPN long to act. Weeks after quietly settling a civil case for an undisclosed sum, they cut ties immediately. No grace period, no farewell, no second chance, just gone. And for all his public talk about returning next season, that comeback now sounds more like hope than certainty. Sexual assault, sexual battery, physical assault, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The nature of these allegations gave them a weight far beyond any car accident case or slip-and-fall claim. Some call it coincidence, but in media, coincidences this precise rarely exist. Executives at ESPN saw the court filings. They read the transcripts. They sat in rooms with lawyers and brand managers. And then, they chose to let the scandal explode on the same weekend as the Hall of Fame ceremony, humiliating not just Shannon, but the Sharpe family name. Was this cold-blooded brand protection or revenge for something behind closed doors? Either way, the silence from ESPN spoke volumes. Shannon was not simply fired. He was erased. Wiped out of ESPN's image library as if he had never been there. Not one co-host, producer, or executive spoke publicly in his defense. Meanwhile, attorney Tony Busby, representing the anonymous Jane Doe, made it clear the key video evidence would not be released. It would be saved as a weapon for court. The betrayal stung deeper because Sharpe had helped carry ESPN's First Take to new heights. His clashes with Stephen A. Smith brought in younger viewers, viral moments, and millions in ad dollars. He transformed a tired debate format into must-watch television. And then, without warning, it was gone, replaced with silence and carefully written legal statements. Was it fair? That is debatable. Was it strategic? Absolutely. In high-stakes media, one accusation can turn a star into a liability overnight. And here's where the conspiracy talk sharpens. What if this was never just about scandal control? What if it was about removing a threat? Right before the lawsuit hit, Sharpe was reportedly close to signing a $100 million podcast deal, a figure that would have made him one of the highest-paid independent voices in sports. Then, suddenly, the lawsuit lands with explosive claims. The deal cools. Corporate partners step back. ESPN cuts him loose without ceremony. Insiders say this is where dark money comes into play. Rumors claim that rival networks and media giants worried Club Shay Shay was becoming too powerful, quietly funded opposition research and lawsuit expenses to destroy his image before he could close the deal. One former podcast executive even admitted there were people looking for a reason to stop that deal, and they got it. Jane Doe's lawyer, Tony Busby, is not just any attorney. He is a high-profile legal hitman who has gone after NFL stars, hip-hop moguls, and politicians from Deshaun Watson to Jay-Z, and even Diddy long before federal agents came knocking. So how does a little-known 20-year-old, fresh from OnlyFans, end up with one of the most aggressive attorneys in the country? And why did her lawsuit drop exactly as Sharpe's streaming empire was about to hit its financial peak? These are not the kind of questions that fade away quietly. These are the kinds of questions that turn the heat all the way up. Behind closed doors in Hollywood and sports media, Shannon Sharpe's legal team came out swinging. They called it a coordinated hit job, accusing the other side of blackmail, twisting the truth, and misusing private recordings. Even though the case was eventually settled, Sharpe has never backed down from his claim that the relationship was completely consensual. He says the payout wasn't an admission of guilt. It was a way to stop even more private, intimate moments from being dragged into public view. This is exactly what happens when someone builds a false story, his attorney, Lanny Davis, said. But if they hoped the settlement would cool things off, it did the opposite. Once word spread that millions had changed hands to keep the matter quiet, the headlines multiplied. Now, on top of the public backlash, Sharpe is staring down a separate defamation lawsuit connected to a relationship from more than 10 years ago. It's a siege from all sides, and in the process, he's lost the powerful media allies who once defended him. While Sharpe retreats from TV, the man who warned this would happen is enjoying his moment. Katt Williams, the comedian whose Club Shay Shay interview became one of the most rewatched podcast moments in recent memory, is now being hailed as a kind of prophet. Rumors say he's already recorded an even more explosive follow-up, possibly dropping on January 3rd, 2025. If that first viral sit-down was a tell-all, was it also a warning? Maybe even a blueprint? Williams didn't just talk about stolen jokes. He described the playbook for how the entertainment machine takes down those who become too successful, too visible, or too independent. He said the moment a black man starts controlling his own platform, the system finds a way to bring him down. If Sharpe was really on the verge of launching a $100 million media empire with complete creative control, he may have walked straight into that trap. It's not hard to picture the private meetings, whispered conversations, and quiet deals, publicists, lawyers, and executives deciding who should be the next problem to handle. Cancel culture isn't just about outrage. It's about power and money. The higher someone climbs, the faster the snare tightens. The moment they start to write their own story, someone else tries to rewrite it. That's not paranoia. That's a pattern. And if Katt Williams saw this coming for Sharpe, the real question is, who's next? Because if a Hall of Fame athlete, Emmy favorite, and crossover star with decades of goodwill can be taken down this fast, then no one's untouchable. The only mystery left is who's holding the pen and who's already in their sights.